In a previous video, I showed this PCB version 1.0 for my VGA 640 by 480 by 2 byte video circuit. I received those PCBs this week, and I went ahead and assembled one of those cards. Card looks pretty good. I knew there were some maybe challenges potentially I was going to run into with the card. And I did run into actually one of those did surface as we get into this. And then I ran into something more significant that wasn't just a minor thing that's causing me to basically revise this card immediately. And I have already revised that card and have those PCBs on order. So here I'm plugging in this 1.0 card and just getting my 286 ready to fire up. And you're going to see that when I actually power on my 286, my OLED screen should be showing me some type of post boot. My LCD should initialize the 2-line LCD. And then what you see to the right is actually what I got on my LCD screen that I plugged into the video card. And that doesn't look promising. So I should be getting a black screen. And in this case, I was just trying to show some basic characters and shapes, but nothing. It's not even making it past the initialization of the card. So I know something's up that's causing the entire system to fail, including the 286. So as I look at this PCB, I was doing some troubleshooting, and I knew that in the left half of this card on the bottom edge, there are some traces that are very close to the edge, too close for comfort, and I was expecting that that could be a problem. Ends up those were not a problem, but what was a problem is this at the bottom of my ISA slot connections. There are actually some routed tracks that go underneath or below, lower on the screen to those pads for connectors. And it shows here that they should be safe, but when the boards were actually manufactured, those very bottom traces were sliced off, so there wasn't quite a very precise cut on these PCBs. At least it didn't match what I've got here on the screen. So I had a handful of traces that got cut off. That's a minor deal, so I fixed that real quickly with some bodge wires, and then I used this setup that you're seeing here, which is basically taking my ISA slot, extending it to a female connector that I can plug the card into and just lay the card down. And that works really well for using the oscilloscope, measuring voltages, just debugging. And so I'm taking a look at that with my bodge wires, and I fired it up, and then this is what I got. And what you'll notice is that the system now boots, and I can see on the card register it's going through the VGA card, it's working through my registers, and I'm looking at the output thinking, this looks a little weird. And instead of a black screen, I'm getting a blue screen. And then like on this animated content, it definitely has some noise to it. Now the vertical lines appear to be gone, so that noise is looking pretty good. But there's just something not right, and I'm wondering, why am I not getting black when I set it to black? Why am I getting all this blue, and why am I getting some really major changes in just what it looks like when it flips between frames? Well, with a little bit of troubleshooting using my scope, I found that my lower bytes, basically my video memory, the low IC for both frame 0 and frame 1, were not outputting any data whatsoever. And that data, of course, ends up going to my low values on my color. So all of the blue and part of the green was not receiving any data whatsoever. And I thought that seemed really odd. Why am I not getting any data from those? And I probed it and realized I'm not getting any address data into those specific ICs. So as I went back and looked at the schematic, I realized that I forgot to update some net labels. And what you'll notice here on the high chip, I have this RA0 underscore And on the right, it's just RA. And at some point, I made the change to this RA0, and my other pair uses RA1. But I must have only updated the high chips and not the low chips to reflect that RA in either 0 or 1. So essentially, this specific chip that you see on the screen, this U9, was cut off and really not receiving address data from anything. And same for the other low chip, it's not receiving address data. So without address data, I can't obviously write to it, I can't read from it. So in the output, I'm not getting any blue, I'm missing half of my, or part of my greens. I've got all the red, I got part of the green, the high green, I'm missing the low green, and I'm missing all the blue. So that gets me to PCB version 1.1. And so this card, I have made a bunch of improvements, and I'm actually liking how this card is looking. Now, first and foremost, I spent a bunch of time just really laying this out in a way that tried to minimize traces running all over the place. Quite a bit more effort than I put into it in the first version. This is still not manually routed. I'm working on that in a separate project for the fun of it and just seeing if I can manually route this PCB. And it's just taken a lot of time. So there's just a lot of connections here and a lot of moving around, but I'll keep working on that. But I didn't want to wait for me to get that figured out before I order up an updated version of this PCB so that I can move forward with my VGA project. And so what you're seeing here is that updated version. So you got the front and the back here, and the major things that I've done on this card you can see on the screen. I've corrected the RAM address net labels. That was disconnecting those lower bytes of my RAM. And you'll see that I really rearranged the entire card for all practical purposes. I've improved the margin between any tracks and the edge of the PCB. There really isn't anything that's real close to the edge anymore. Even at the bottom of those ISA connectors, I actually had gone in before I did my routing and blocked all that off so that there's no routing that could possibly go on the bottom part of those. I've also significantly reduced the overall track length on the card. I've reduced significantly the number of vias used on the card. My copper fill is much better now. There's a lot more copper fill because of the updated routing on here. You'll also notice I have quite a few more resistors on the output side of the card on the right side. And basically I've changed that over to an R2R ladder for my digital to analog conversion. And so that should give me a more precise digital to analog conversion compared to what I had before. And then I've also just made some silkscreen improvements. For example, the P-socket, it wasn't clear which way it should be placed, and I could easily put it in 180 degrees backwards, so I put on some silkscreen to make that more clear of which side is the USB connector and the programmer header and things like that. So this is what it looks like. I have ordered this up. Price of the card is the same. It's $4 US per card. Maybe in a couple more weeks, I'll come back to this card and see if this updated version turns out to work better. I would say with the version I have, I fixed those bottom traces and I was able to validate that things seem to be working on the output like they should. And if I, kind of held my finger over the data on that pair of chips that wasn't working right, I could get everything to look black and basically grounding those signals. But of course I'm missing any blue color, I'm missing half my green, and I did not want to run 32 baud wires. So more to come on this PCB in a couple of weeks.